So then, we are back with the modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzaielic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per MatitiYAhu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. So then, as we read from MatitiYAhu the prophet, the layers related with the autumn feast and spring feast, then we understand the importance of knowing what is heaven. There are so many translations regarding this word, and the best way for us is then finding out what the Messiah has said regarding tabernacling. Understandably, tabernacling is the way of salvation. And what does it mean then, salvation? And the path? What does it mean, the Spirit? So let's try to understand a situation. Truly, the Spirit is directly related with the divine being, and as we read, the Spirit simply is the path. Truly, the soul of the person, when a person is born again, simply means a person has a choice of wanting the path or not. There is not a spirit that's going to absolutely direct you as a robot. You have to make choices, you have to study. Wanting tabernacling. Tabernacling won't be given if you don't wish it. So then, heaven, thousands upon thousands of scoundrels around the world teaching heaven as a situation related with utopia, and part of the human beings always desiring something else as far as rejecting then tabernacling, the holy instructions, and yet thinking of some sort of end where then heaven is the final stop. As far as what the Messiah has said, let's read from MatitiYAhu. Then he explains of the cities, and then what they were saying as far as what the Messiah was teaching. Then he was found then himself in Capernaum, in Korzain, in Bethsaida, in many other of these areas. Then we read the Messiah saying in the 23rd chapter, we find then many other situations related with the Messiah, but this particular chapter, the 11th and on, you find the Messiah speaking many other words as far as Sheol, S-H-E-O-L, Sheol. And then he explains, but I say to you then, on Tzor and on Sidon, it will be more tranquil in a day of judgment than for you. Obviously, the Messiah was speaking in another way. The Messiah never made jokes when related with the holy instructions. So then, this understanding obviously is switched around. But let's not then evaluate this point, because the most important point at the moment is understanding heaven. But I give thanks then to you, my Father, then the glorious creator of heaven and earth. And he continues. And then he states in the 29th, bear my yoke upon you and learn from me. It's not bearing of any yoke. The understanding is remaining disciplined and staying on the path as he was. However, if we do on our own, becomes very heavy. As we trust in him, as we read the instructions, then the Messiah himself helps us. But he's not going to take away the heavy responsibility. So this situation, bear my yoke and blah blah blah, translation was not proper. So then he says, then have tranquility in your souls. What he was saying was this. What is the content of this section? Firstly, he was explaining of the rejection of the Messiah as he was teaching. It is amazing these days when people are speaking of tabernacling, people always reject. The Messiah knew in the future or during his time, the very core of human beings absolutely is evil. And some people, they have this misconception of saying, if the Messiah was only around to teach us, you wouldn't be able to bear his teaching. If you're explaining lightly as far as what he did, only sections of it and portions of it, people already mock. Imagine if the Messiah was explaining profound understandings of the instructions. Heaven. So then, as he was explaining this topic, what is this subject? The subject is the judgment. What do we understand of these when we read the 22nd verse? What we read then in the 23rd verse, as far as the Sodom and the cities of the plain. And he continues on, and then he states, finding rest for your souls. What it's explaining is this: when a person dies and believes in him tabernacling, then the soul of the person rests. What is the antonymous of these? Sheol. Verse 20 plus you find the 23rd verse. So what is the content of these? The content is then the judgment, vengeance, autumn feast. What the Messiah is explaining is this: as you trust him until you die, then your soul is resting. He guards the soul until the new earth is re-established. So then, around the world, lots of junkie teachers, they explain, but then you have to trust then the Savior, you have to do this and then the other, you have to behave yourself, and the behavioral list goes on and on and on. Then if you do so, not based from obedience of the instructions as completed, but as working of their own hands, and then goes on, and then when you die, then you go to heaven. What are you going to do in heaven if you were made for the earth? Some people, they have the idea of being floating in air in space. It's amazing what people think of heaven. They think then of a new dimension, of another planet some way, where then they are in a spirit and they are given a body, and then they spend 1,000 years with the Messiah. Then they will judge the world with him. It is amazing the types of teachings that are out there. Some other people, they think, oh, because at the end of time, then you are coming from the dust. Then you are coming back from the dead, and can you imagine the stupidity of this? Then people, they come out of the earth as they were contaminated, but then they come out of the earth with a glorified body. From a contaminated state comes out then a person with a glorified body. Not waiting until this earth is destroyed and reestablished, then the soul that was resting then returns, and it's given then a glorified body. Scoundrels. Then some of these liars and teachers of their own, they go further. They place themselves in a position where then you should revere them. Damn scoundrels. You don't revere anybody. You listen to the words of the Messiah. That's as far as it goes. Heaven. Some people, when they read these as a yoke, animals use yoke as bearing burdens. The Messiah won't remove sometimes the heavy weight of responsibility. He simply won't do it. He helps you find a way. He enlightens the path so you can find a way while bearing the burdens. Then he explains, after you have done this, trusting him, being interested of tabernacling, then he shows the path, as dark as it may be. He enlightens the path, so then you can take your burden and then goes on with it. He's not removing the burden. As you are walking on a path, he enlightens the path as if he was shining a light. When you finish with your responsibilities, then your soul rests. Then this earth then is burnt, ended with, reformed, and then we come out of our places of rest and a glorified body is given. But then if scoundrels of teachers and pastors of their own, they speak this way, they don't earn a living, do they? And quite honestly, they're not interested in speaking the truth. As long as they can manipulate and scandalize, so they do it. Then the Messiah said, "Come, those who are laboring and bearing the burdens." What the Messiah has said of himself, he is the light of the world. What do you understand of a dark path while doing the work for him? Don't you understand you are having a heavy load, doing the work on behalf of the Messiah, testifying on his name or on his behalf? Then the Messiah enlightens, shines a light on a path. And as you labor during the lifetime, then when you die, then your soul rests. And no person is coming from the dead in this age anymore. These damn scoundrels of teachers and pastors, they are always lying. If they say to you, you must then be risen from the dead while in this age, then they are crazy. When the Messiah told his people, sometimes couple by couple or 7 by 7 and then more, they were exercising the functions except during a specific time in history where people came from the dead. There is no reason for it, because it becomes sensationalism, mysticism of some sort. When a true believer in tabernacling goes to rest, remains at rest. There is no reason for coming from there. What the Messiah did and say is already enough. Either you believe it or you don't believe it. As the rich man's soul was then involved with so many others in torment, and the rich man could not come out of there. Then there was the understanding of the soul of the unfortunate, believed tabernacling his entire life, and then was resting. So what is the content of the 11th chapter? Explains of the vengeance coming, autumn feast, speaks of Sheol, where the torment is at, and it explains of those people bearing their burdens and being enlightened while doing so, and as they do for their entire lives. Then as they die, their souls rest. There is no indication of the Messiah taking our burden for you. He doesn't take the burden of anybody. He had to bear his own. So must we. So then, when you die, you are not going to heaven. There is not in utopia place over there in the skies, where then your soul then is flying around. Or some of them are so religious they think they're going to be part of the group of the Creator himself. They're going to sit on thrones over there. Can you imagine? They always rejected his holy instructions. Then they're going to sit amongst his very own. And not only this, they're going to be there for 1,000 years. Then they're going to judge the nations. Rejecting the instructions, they will to judge the nations. Only listening to this is absolutely ridiculous. So there is no place of utopia in heaven or any other place. And as people die in this earth, their flesh, wilt, rot, returns to dust. The soul has only a couple of choices. Either rests in the Messiah, tabernacling, or goes to torment. There is not a third place where then the soul of the person then is flying around in the sky. But it is amazing the number of lies that goes around. Because the grandma then is in heaven. No, she's down there in Sheol. Grandpa, because he's in heaven. No, he's not in heaven. He's in Sheol. Because they were so loving during their lifetime. The birds are loving. Cats are loving. Dogs are loving. What is this distinction of this kind of love and then tabernacling? Grandmother, grandfather, no tabernacling, torment. When the parents, as ignorant as they are, then, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Concocting for themselves teachers. Damn liars and scoundrels. They don't go to heaven themselves, and then they impede those who are trying to go. You know how many thousands of soldiers have died in the false Messiah? Straight down into torment. They went to war during their lifetime, and then an infinite war until this age ends. And the Messiah said, "Come." What he's saying is, maintain yourself on a path. The Messiah shines the light, the path is there, take a burden and move on. As a soldier would take up the gear and moves on trail. Now let me ask you this. MatitiYAhu has said, we should act ourselves as soldiers in the army. Can you imagine if you are in the army and you have your backpack and you ask the sergeant then to take your weight on his back? The words coming from the sergeant would not be very nice. You are there with an objective. You want to grab your backpack and walk. But then the concocted Messiah then is such a mamby-pamby scoundrel. No, because if you do this, then he takes your burden for you. He won't take your burden for you. You know what the sergeant would say in your face? Damn you, scoundrel. You grab your... starts with S. His grandpa and grandma in heaven? No, they are in Sheol, in torment. And if you don't take care of yourself and don't believe tabernacling, so you must be then in torment. So the instructions are simple. The recordings of the spring feast, they are very simple, but they are not prone for human pleasure. You don't read the instructions thinking you can avoid or then neglect your responsibilities. During the time of the burden, during the time of the weight, heavy responsibilities, as we read tabernacling, while in this situation, and not having a projection of situation, I'm doing this because of the Savior. No, you're doing this for you. Then the Messiah shows the path. That's the maximum he can do. It's already a privilege, because if he would leave us in the dark, not only we would have to have this weight of responsibilities, plus not having a path to walk on properly. And people shouldn't be confused with as much as given, as much as required from a Gentile viewpoint. It makes no sense. Only because you're a CEO of a company does not mean that God then is there leading you. He's not even part of it. If you don't know tabernacling, He's not there. Let's make this very clear. No tabernacling, no salvation. Plain and simple. The Messiah never made it complicated. But I have burdens and weight, and sometimes I have responsibilities, and always part of our work until we die. Then our souls, afterwards, then they rest. Next time, we're going to evaluate once again post-autumn feast, and verified from Revelation, lining up with the prophets, and then understanding the 21st and 22nd chapter of Revelation directly related with MatitiYAhu. Sections of Ezekiel, find Zechariah. So then, as we read the future in Revelation, then further in the future is then the prophets. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.